very interesting topic to talk about in this particular program. It's a topic that I like to call crimes of the mind, or better known as paper crimes. And these are crimes dealing with theft, money, finances, fraud. Crimes that aren't as popular on television because mostly you get the murder, rapes, and robberies. But these are crimes that are equally serious because of the ramifications that take place. People who get picked up and charged with these crimes, and eventually if they're convicted of them, will have an incredibly hard time being able to be employed, to find their own businesses, to be licensed in any particular profession. So we're going to walk through a number of different areas, the misdemeanors, the felonies, and some of the serious consequences of these crimes as we go through this program. So sit back and maybe grab a friend or call someone and let them know that Darryl Stallworth is going to tell you some incredible information that will hopefully and continue to keep you out of jail. As I mentioned earlier, we're talking about crimes of the mind. Crimes when you're dealing with theft, paper crimes, robbery without weapons, but robbery of money, embezzlement, things of that nature. But some of the basic misdemeanor crimes dealing with theft are crimes that are particularly interesting because of what is now available in many department stores and grocery stores, and that's cameras. I can remember back in 1992 when I started as a prosecutor in Berkeley that I was amazed at the number of people that were being arrested and charged with stealing items from out of grocery stores, Ross, department stores. Many of them had no idea that they were being watched by a camera. Many of them had no idea that there were undercover agents in the store posing as shoppers, following people around. Now, we all know that particular types of people, people of color, are going to be targeted in these type of surveillance cameras, these type of undercover agents. So what I'm providing to you in this program is a heads up, letting you know that when you walk into the store, be prepared that someone's going to have you on camera, someone's going to follow you around, and someone's going to be present, watching what you do, watching what you pick up, watching what you take into a particular dressing room, watching what you bring to the counter, whether or not you paid for everything. The disturbing part about this type of surveillance is for the people who actually are innocently just trying to buy items. Now, for those who have actually gone into a store looking to steal something, you can best and rest assured that you're going to get caught. The technology is just too powerful now. The employment of undercover agents in all of these department stores is just rampant. So you're not going to be able to walk into any store of any significance and be able to walk out with any particular item. Where you're bringing something back and you want to get an exchange for it, or you want to get money for it, there's a critical eye, particularly for people of color, when you do that, because then an investigation starts and a background check starts with the people who are taking your names. They're trying to determine whether or not you were the person that purchased the item. They're trying to determine whether or not, if you weren't the person that purchased the item, whether or not they were a credible person. I've had a number of people that I'm aware of who've gone into a store and innocently wanted to exchange an item and found themselves being arrested for theft. I've seen people who have innocently put something in their pocket or in their bag and forgot to bring it to the register, and they get to the door and they find out that they're being arrested and eventually charged with a crime. And the sad consequences of this type of act, if you're not aware of it, is that when you get charged with a theft crime, it changes your whole profile. It changes your credit score. It changes your insurance. It changes your ability to keep your job, and it changes your ability to be able to get a job. All of which can be avoided if you take some of the basic steps, which is always be aware of any item that you're exchanging, that you know where it came from, the source. You have your receipt. You have all the information up front. You have the cancel check when you bring it to the store. Secondly, be aware that when you get to a counter or a cashier or a door, that all the items that you pay for have receipts and that they are accessible to you. Check your pockets, check your purse, check your bag. Make sure there aren't any other items that you may have looked at and innocently placed in your bag or your purse or your cart. Because the explanation that I didn't know it was there, as you might imagine, is not going to fly for most people. And you find yourself being picked up, being detained, being arrested, having to bail out, having to get an attorney, having to come to court and deal with the embarrassing ramifications of what was a very innocent act. What I'm hoping you can take from this information is a sense of concern and a sense of review and reflection every time you get ready to go into a store. Now, oftentimes as well, particularly with young people, and this is the message to those of you that are 17, 18, all the way up into your early 20s, there's a large number of people who are being arrested and charged with crimes that I call the hookup crimes. You've got somebody working somewhere and they're trying to hook you up. You've got someone that's providing you some type of item and they're giving you a hookup. When I was in school years ago, we had calling cards where you could use a number and make a phone call. Well, of course, as you can imagine, there was a market where calling cards were being used that had no particular source. They were illegal. But if someone owed somebody some money, instead of giving them that money, they would give them that calling card. And then after a while, a number of people would use this card and sometimes call from a landline, and then you would get investigated and you would get charged. You lose your ability sometimes to even stay in school because you got caught with a hookup. Or you've got somebody who's working in a department store, at Sears, at Macy's, even at Nordstrom's, and you know them, you've gone to school with them, and you see them there, and you ask for a discount that's not available. And they may not know and understand, unfortunately, that they're jeopardizing their job, and they try to give you some type of hookup. The $10 or $15 or the $20 that you're getting a break on is not going to even come close to the type of pain and tragedy that you're going to find yourself involved in once that case gets picked up. You, the person that's getting the hookup, and the person that's giving you the hookup are going to find themselves in an awful lot of legal trouble. Be aware that there's no free ride. Your parents probably told you a long time ago, there's no free lunch. Anything that's too good is probably too bad. You can't get something for nothing. All of these cliches are particularly important because that's the way it is. You cannot find yourself trying to take advantage of even the hookups that you've seen where people have credit cards. I can't buy this for you with cash, but here's the credit card. You don't know where that credit card came from. You can't take that credit card to a store and try to use it. You're going to be the one that's arrested. They're going to say that you have this credit card and it's been fraudulently used. You don't know where a check came from unless you are familiar with that person. Someone gives you a check and you're not familiar with them. That check could have been counterfeit. That check could have been a production of fraud. Be particularly careful about exchanging items or using credit cards or checks that aren't in your name or aren't in the name of a person that you're familiar with, because you will find yourself going down that slippery slope of being arrested and being charged and dealing with this incredibly painful journey. Now I'm going to talk to you about some of the more serious crimes related to the paper crimes, crimes of the mind. In this modern era, there are a number of crimes that are related to cell phones. There's so many of them out there. Tell you what many of you already know, and you have to take heed, and you have to listen very carefully. Don't ever use a cell phone that's not yours. Don't ever think that you're going to be able to beat the AT&T or the Verizon or the Sprint or the iPhone by using a phone that you haven't purchased. I'm telling you not to even use your friends' phones if you can avoid it at all for a period of time, because you don't know the source. There's a lot of phones that are being dummied up out there. There are a lot of phones that are being circulated that have been stolen, that have been used fraudulently, that are in the hands of people who have committed criminal acts. And if you find yourself connected to that particular phone and that phone has been involved in a phone call that related to some type of crime, then you're going to be associated with it. And you're going to find yourself being unable to, one, to get another phone, two, being charged with a particular crime. Be very, very careful about using anybody's cell phone or having in your possession a cell phone that's not yours, because it could be related to a number of different crimes that you're not familiar with, and you can find yourself being pulled into that particular crime. And that leads me to, another area. And there's a penal code section called Penal Code Section 496, possession of stolen property. This is along those lines as well, where someone's giving you something that the law says if a reasonable person believes or should have believed that this item was stolen and you take it, then you can be charged with possession of stolen property. The classic example is a vehicle. Now, most of you already know what a hot car is. A hot car is a car that someone gives you or lets you drive that doesn't have a key to it. You know that there's no key and you've got to hot wire it or you've got to push that button because the ignition is knocked out, then you have to assume that this car has been stolen. Oftentimes you can also be charged with having stolen the vehicle, even though there's no evidence or witnesses that says or can show that you actually stole the vehicle. But circumstantially, the law says that if you're driving it and anybody with a reasonable mind can conclude that this car has been stolen, then you can be charged with stolen vehicle. At the minimum, you'll be charged with being in possession of stolen property because you know it's not your car. You know it can't be identified as from anybody that you know, or the county jail for up to a year. It can put you on probation where you have a search clause that says that your person, your property, your home, and your car can be searched at any time in any place. You lose all your privacy rights when you're on felony probation. If you commit a crime while you're on felony probation, you don't get to have a hearing. You can just be violated from a probation violation and you don't even get a jury trial. You don't even get the high standard of proof which says beyond a reasonable doubt. It's just more likely than not. And when your probation is violated, then you can be sentenced up to the amount of time that your felony case represents. So a felony possession of stolen property is 16 months, 2 years, or 3 years in state prison. If you're fortunate enough not to do any time while you're on probation and then your probation is violated, you can be sent to prison for 16 months, 2 years, or 3 years in state prison for having driven a car that most reasonable people would have believed that was stolen. Be very, very careful about those type of gifts. Motorcycles, cars, anything that you know you cannot trace the source of. I would go as far as that if I can't see the pink slip of the owner of that property, then I don't want to have it. Computers, backpacks, cameras, watches. I know that you can walk down Broadway or International Avenue without somebody trying to sell you something. And I know that it's awful tempting to buy a watch that looks like it's a Rolex for $25, $30. Well, you've got to assume that that watch is stolen. You've got to assume that it's hot. And if you're ever arrested or detained and they see you in possession of that watch and you don't have a receipt for it, it doesn't matter that you are not responsible for having stolen it. You're in possession of it. You're in possession of stolen property. And you're going to wind up having a felony and deal with all those probation characters and issues, and you're going to have to deal with that painful consequence. So once again, I'm encouraging you to do everything you can to just be smart and stay away from those type of situations. Other felonies involved with crimes of the mind are cases where you're working and you've got a credit card from your job, or you get an opportunity to use a vehicle. If you abuse any one of those particular privileges that you get from your job, then the law says that you can be charged with embezzlement. You're using the property without the authority of the employer because you've gone outside of the scope. A typical example is that many people are oftentimes given a credit card that's associated with their job. Now that credit card allows you to buy stationery, allows you to buy all those items that are related to doing your job. Which means you can't go out and buy groceries. You can't buy a plane ticket. You can't buy any type of beauty products. You can't buy anything. Sometimes you think, I'll just do it and then I'll reimburse them. And that seems innocent enough, but that's not what the company sees. The company sees that you've taken advantage of their opportunity to trust you. And when you've done that, then they're going to contact the authorities. You're going to be arrested and you're going to be charged. And you're going to lose your job. And you're going to have to pay a fine. You're going to have to pay all that money back. And you already know that the likelihood of getting another job after picking up a crime like that It's almost impossible. Don't let an opportunity that looks like it's good or a situation that gives you some discretion to be misinterpreted in any way, shape, or form. Make sure that anything that you're doing on your job, any property that you're given, some people are given cars for their job, and that car is for you to go to work and to come back home, or to drop off a product and bring it back. People have been fired and charged with abuse of their powers by taking that car over to a movie, or taking that car to pick up somebody from their family, taking that truck or that phone vehicle or anything that's related to their job outside of the scope. Those type of crimes are going to come back, and they're going to be painful for you as well. We're going to finish up our discussion on crimes of the mind, paper crimes dealing with theft, money, and finances, with a review on a number of areas dealing with forgery and fraud. Most of you are familiar with those terms. In the legal sense, it means that if you are representing something that is untrue, and you represent that in written form, typed form, then you violated the law. You've done something unlawful. The typical example is that you can't sign someone else's name on a check. And I know that this is oftentimes a very innocent scenario. You've got a wife, a husband, a child, a mother, a father who has given you permission to write a check or to purchase an item, and they've given you a check. But you make sure that they write and they sign that check. You make sure that you have authorization. I'm encouraging all of you to go as far as to make sure that you have a document with you that says that my mother, my father, my wife, my husband has authorized me to use this check to purchase this particular item. Because if it ever becomes an issue, whether or not you've been properly authorized, you want to have that paperwork as your defense. Because as many of you know, and some of you unfortunately may find out, that the law can be particular about whether or not you have proper authorization. And because if we're talking about family, friends, or even an employer, oftentimes you may find yourself being accused of having signed a document that you never had authority to sign, though you believe in fact you have. The classic examples are a lot of our elderly family members who are unable to sign a check, and you want to make sure you get groceries for them. And they've given you authorization verbally to sign a check and to purchase an item, but you don't have the power of attorney. You don't have that document. And you wind up purchasing items using that check. You can't imagine how many people have been charged, one with forgery and two with elder abuse, because they haven't taken the steps to properly identify their role in that person's life and what they're doing and what they're purchasing. Do everything you can to make sure that before you are representing the interests of any person, particularly an elderly person, by signing something or documenting something, that you've got a certified copy of power of attorney if you're going to be handling money, property, checks, purchases for any family member or friend, that you are properly authorized and that you can be recognized by any court as having the proper authority to do that. And then we can also outline what you can do and what you can do with those different type of resources. Areas that also become problematic, particularly nowadays in this particular market, is real estate transactions. You have these particular items, they need to be certified, they need to be notarized, you need to have a witness present. You don't want anybody to, one, sue you civilly, and then two, accuse you of having done something criminal because you've signed a document and you agreed to make yourself available or make funds available. We've learned, unfortunately, the hard way that real estate transactions require the utmost scrutiny. They require you to be as comfortable as possible. They require nowadays legal advice. I would not ever sit down with those 35, 40 pages of documents and go through them when you're talking about purchasing something that's going to cost you $300,000, $400,000, maybe $500,000. without being properly advised as to whether or not this is a particular transaction that you can, one, afford, and two, that you're properly authorized to be able to accept. Always understand that it's better to take your time and make sure you're comfortable with all the terms before you rush into any type of project, because you don't want to have to deal with the civil repercussions, and more importantly, for the purpose of this program, you don't want to deal with the criminal repercussions, being accused of abusing a particular family member or friend, or abusing the system altogether with any type of fraudulent behavior. The key to this entire program, and I can go on forever with all the different types of crimes associated with money and finances. What I'm encouraging all of you to do is take stock of what you're doing, who you're working with, how you're making your purchases, what you're doing with your finances, and making sure that anything that you receive, anything that you're in possession of, anything that you're in control of, comes from a legitimate source. I want to make sure that all of you are as comfortable and you understand as best you can to stay away from those areas and those environments, particularly with these paper crimes and these money crimes, so that you can continue to have healthy, prosperous lives, and most importantly, to make sure that you stay out of jail. Thank you for watching.